This is Research Like a Pro, episode 40, DNA, Mind Maps, and Diagramming. Welcome to Research Like a Pro, a genealogy podcast about taking your research to the next level, hosted by Nicole Dyer and Diana Elder, accredited genealogy professional. Diana and Nicole are the mother-daughter team at FamilyLocket.com and the creators of the Amazon best-selling book, Research Like a Pro, a Genealogist Guide. I'm Nicole, co-host of the podcast. Join Diana and me as we discuss how to stay organized, make progress in our research, and solve difficult cases. Let's go. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the show. I'm Nicole Dyer, co-host of the podcast, and I'm here with accredited genealogist Diana Elder, my mom. Today, we are talking about DNA, mind maps, and diagramming. Hi, Diana. How are you?
I'm doing well today. Thank you so much.
So we're going to read a review from Foltz Genealogist from Stitcher. She titled the review, Genealogy Research Tips for All Levels. Boston University's Genealogical Essentials class recently opened my eyes that my decade-long research methods have been completely amateur in nature. I turned to the Research Like a Pro podcast for better instruction on how to improve my hunt for ancestors, and it has taught me so much in so little time during my commutes to and from work. I tend to feel very overwhelmed by the plethora of sources to wade through and the number of ancestral stories to uncover. But Diana and Nicole's goal-setting tips help to ease my anxiety through the process. In fact, I've just signed up for their e-course study group and can't wait to get started on a fresh project the right way. I am curious, though, how big of a disadvantage is it to not visit the family history library? What collections or resources do they provide that a genealogist might have trouble accessing online or elsewhere? Diana, what do you think of that?
Well, I think that we are so lucky because today more and more of those collections are being digitized. And so I do a lot of my research from home, never having to visit the family history library. We're in a stage where we can use a lot of the resources at the family history library, such as the microfilm that's been digitized just from our own home. So the things that you would not be able to access, there are some of the collections that are locked and you'd have to go to a family history center, but those are near everyone. You know, there's probably one within an hour or two of everyone who's listening. And then there are certain books, and those are being digitized also, but some of those you still have to see at the family history library. So what I say is do the best you can with what you can get online. And then if you have to hire somebody to go do a lookup for you, you certainly can do that. I do that for people. There are other researchers that do lookups. So, it's okay. It's all good.
You can do it. I do most of my things online. Every once in a while, I'll call a repository or email an archivist to see if they have a collection or something that I might need. And usually they'll say, we don't actually have that. Or they say, here, I can search it for you. So sometimes you can just ask and they'll do it for free. All right, today we're talking about diagramming your DNA matches and complex relationships. And Diana and I have been having some fun the last couple of weeks, really diving into mapping out some of our clients and our own DNA matches to solve difficult cases in our family trees. So we're excited to talk about it.
Yes. There are some things that you just have to visualize, and DNA is one of them. I just did a project this week, and I could not wrap my mind around it until I got it into a chart. So this is a great thing to discuss and give some ideas on how to do this, because I know everybody is kind of feeling the same way I did. How do we visualize DNA matches, not to mention when we've got all these different records and we've got all these different people in the same name, the same county, and we're trying to visualize how they're all related to each other. So using some mind mapping, using some different types of programs, we can really map this out and make it so that we make new discoveries because we actually see the data.
Right. So true. So typically we would use like a regular family tree or a pedigree. We could use our Roots Magic software or whatever it is we like to use. But sometimes these kind of charts just don't cut it when we're doing DNA research and trying to map out our cousin matches who could be descended through several lines of descent from a common ancestor. So usually in autosomal research, we're needing to chart out many descendants of the same ancestral couple. So during our data collection and analysis step during our research, That's when we might need to use these different diagramming tools that we're going to talk about today, because that traditional family tree software or ancestry pedigrees, even in the family view, can often not be good enough to help us see all the connections. And if you're not sure what we mean by that, but you have looked at through lines on Ancestry DNA, just picture a big chart with all the ancestry through lines showing one common ancestor and showing a bunch of different descendants through which you share matches in your DNA. So that's kind of what we're talking about today, is how to make charts like that. And if you have cousin matches in different websites, not just Ancestry, or you don't have a through line for the certain ancestor that you're wanting to map to, then you'll have to make your own diagram. So let's talk about a case study that Diana did first. She had her sister who was adopted and tried to solve her biological parents. And she ended up utilizing a mind map to diagram a bunch of the matches and figure out and solve the case. So, Diana, why don't we talk about that? So, what was kind of the objective of this case study?
Well, like you said, it was my sister's adoptee case, and I had helped her find her maternal line several years ago through regular genealogy. She had got a copy of the birth certificate and had a surname, and we were able to track down her birth mother, but she had never been able to locate a father. So I suggested that she try DNA testing and see what we could figure out. So she did her DNA testing, and it was really fun because right away we saw that she was 22% Finnish. So that is a lot of one ethnicity. So that told me that her father was half Finnish because we had her mother's side. Luckily, one of her half sisters had tested, and so we were able to completely get rid of half of her matches, knowing that they were on the mother's side, which was so beneficial. So then I was able to take the other half and see where we were. And because I had this Finnish side that was, a quarter of them were Finnish, then I had a real clear idea of the other side. And I was starting out making like a spreadsheet or putting in a Google Doc these different names and surnames and, trying to figure out some things. And finally, I just said, okay, I have got to draw this out. And I'd heard other people talk about, drawing out their DNA matches. So I decided to try MindMaps, which is online. It can be paid, but I use the free program and saved to my Google Drive. And I started putting in some of these matches looking for connections. And it was nice because the Finnish side, I didn't do a mind map for them because I had a basic ancestral couple figured out. But it was the other side that was tricky because there was some Native American blood there. There were a bunch of half relationships. And I just had to try to map out all these various people and how they were all related to each other.
Wow. So let's review. So you already knew the mother's side. So using shared matches on Ancestry with a close relationship to a half sister on the mother's side, you were able to group all the shared matches with that mother's side match and kind of eliminate them to help you focus in on the father's side.
Right.
Then, since you knew the father's side had to be Finnish because the mother you knew and you knew she wasn't Finnish, so you knew the father's side was Finnish, then you created more shared matches on that and figured out an ancestral couple that was probably the couple that was an ancestor of Nancy's father.
Right. And it was helpful because the Finnish ancestors lived in Michigan. So there's an enclave there of, people of Finnish descent. And then the other branch of the family was in Montana. So it was really clear that these were two sides of the family. One was the father, one was the mother. But I didn't know which. I mean, her father had either a mother or a father who was Finnish and one who was from Montana. So I didn't know, but I figured out that the two of them got together and got married.
Okay, so what you had was you were kind of narrowing down that the father of Nancy had either a mother from Montana or Michigan or a father from Montana or Michigan, but you didn't know which.
Yeah, exactly. Didn't know which was which. And one of the challenges was the Michigan Finnish family, the common ancestral couple that all of the DNA matches were linking back to, they had 17 children. Okay, so
Hmm.
that's a lot of descendants. So
Oh my goodness.
I saw that and I decided that I would maybe focus on the other half first because it was a little bit
Right?
less work. And if I could figure out a possibility on the Montana side, then maybe I could make a connection to the Finnish people from Michigan. So it was really fun to create my mind map, and I had figured out kind of the common ancestral couple of all these different matches of the Montana people, and had my little diagrams and how much DNA they shared and all the possible relationships. So when we go to Ancestry now, we click on the little I for details, we can get a list of all these different relationships. And so here's just one example. So this can show you how tricky it was. So her closest match said these are her possibles. She could have been a half first cousin once removed, a first cousin twice removed, a half second cousin, a second cousin once removed, a half first cousin twice removed, or a first cousin 3 times removed. So those were my choices. The interesting thing was, as I talked about in the last episode, she turned out to be not quite any of those relationships. She was something a little bit different. It was a tricky case. But my mind mapping definitely helped me see where the possible turned out to be grandmother of Nancy came from.
So the grandmother ended up being from the Montana branch?
Yep. And the grandfather turned out to be from the Finnish Michigan people. So the way this finally came to a resolution was my sister had sent messages to all of her close DNA matches, and one of them on the Finnish side knew of a cousin who had done a ton of descendancy research on those 17 children from Michigan.
Great. How
And
convenient.
yes, so she sent me his phone number. We talked on the phone and I looked at my mind map, and he was, looking at his descendancy research, and we figured it out. And I did a search for the marriage, and I actually found the marriage record of the grandparents, who had my sister's father, who their son was her father. So anyway, it was really fun.
So when you were talking on the phone with that guy, what did you say? Like, do you have any descendants who could have come to Montana?
Yeah, I actually did. I said, did anybody come to Montana? And these are the years that they would have come. And he said, oh, yeah, I think that there was this one that went to Montana. So he looked through his records, and I'm looking at my mind map and the things I've gathered up. And right then I did a little search for the marriage record as we were talking. He said, oh, I think
Oh,
it was maybe this gentleman. And so I did a search. He gave me a surname. So as you can imagine, with all those 17 children, there were a few different surnames
mm-hmm.
because women would marry, and so you had different surnames brought in, but they were all marrying within the Finnish community, so they're all still Finnish.
Oh,
So as soon as he had the suspected father and gave me a surname, I put that in with my suspected person, and it popped the marriage record. So looking back, I think I could have found it just with the marriage record, but I needed his help because he had some surnames. And I could have done descendancy on all 17 children and taken me a couple years maybe and figured it out. But I was very grateful that he had done all that work and was willing to share and help me figure out how it connected.
so one of the 17 children was a grandparent to Nancy's dad, or how far back was that?
Yep, believe it was a grandparent.
Cool. So then he traced it down to one of their children who got married to somebody from Montana and then produced a child who was Nancy's dad.
That is correct.
Wow, that's cool.
Yep. It was really fun, and she was able to connect with half sisters on that side, and just to kind of close that chapter of always wondering who is my biological dad. And it was fun because she looks like her half sisters, and now that we know that she's Finnish and we see pictures of the Finnish side, she definitely looks like that. So
Wow.
it's really fun on these adoptee cases. They don't always end really, really well. Sometimes they end well, sometimes not so well, but it's always good closure for the adoptee to connect and figure out where they came from.
That's neat. Well, it sounds like the mind map really helped you to figure out the possible relationships that could have married into that Finnish side. So that's neat. Good job. Well, let's talk next about another program that you can use to create diagrams to help you with your DNA matches. And that is one that our genetic genealogist guest blogger, Robin Wirthlin, has been telling us about, Lucid Chart. I think it's my new favorite tool. Diana and I have been using it a lot. And I want to share what I used it for last week, which was a huge project that I did for a client, which, it was supposed to be the end of a project that I was doing for him. I'm going to change the names in the case study that I'm going to share because I'm still working on it. So it's on the Jones family. And my client had wanted me to research the Jones surname back in time on his patrilineal line. And we got back to the 1600s and needed some more evidence, and the Y-DNA test we thought would provide helpful clues to know which Jones line he came from. So he took the Y-DNA test, and the results came back with only 2 matches, and neither of them were Jones. And he didn't fit in with the Jones surname project, and we were quite surprised. So I looked at his first match, and it was a Pearson, and it was a genetic distance of 5 on the Y67 test. And I thought, that doesn't seem very close, but what the heck? I'll search within his autosomal DNA results and see if there's any Pearsons. And there were actually a lot of close cousin matches in the autosomal results in Ancestry that had Pearson ancestors not very far back. And I traced all these matches, ancestries, back in already created trees on Ancestry and Family Search to one common ancestor. And it was back about 8 generations. And I traced that back on his Y-DNA match also. So I started noticing all these trends, and I started putting it into a diagram in LucidChart. And this was seriously the best thing that could have happened to me, was using LucidChart, because it ended up being an extremely large chart, and you can zoom in and out on LucidChart to see all of the matches. And what I did was put that common ancestor at the top and then create all these boxes going down in lines from him, showing the descendancy until you reach the match on Ancestry. And then I expanded out to not just using Ancestry DNA matches, but MyHeritage DNA matches, because we had put the client's DNA in several different places. And in MyHeritage, it's even better because I could do some segment triangulation. And using the shared matches, I found that there was one segment that had been passed down probably from the same ancestor, because it all matched in the same spot on a certain chromosome. So putting all that information into a Lucid chart helped me really see the probabilities of certain relationships and that it all fit together. And I still haven't solved the exact point at which my client's Jones ancestry had a non-paternal event or a misattributed parentage, but I have a very good hypothesis now that he's actually a Pearson and not a Jones, and that he comes from a certain branch where his closest autosomal DNA matches also descend from. One of his matches shares 92 centimorgans with him, so it was a pretty high shared match.
Okay, so let me just ask you a couple questions here. So you put both the Y-DNA and the autosomal DNA matches on the same chart. Is that correct?
Yeah, I actually started with just the Y-DNA match, that Pearson, and I created a little chart just straight up his patrilineal line with one box to the next going up, and put him all the way up to this ancestor who was the last one I could find. It was the furthest back I could trace him. And I was thinking, well, if there's a 90% probability that my client is related to this Y-DNA match in 8 generations, then I need to trace this person back as far as I can. So I traced him back as far as I can and put it in LucidChart. Then after that, I started searching in the autosomal DNA matches for anybody who had a Pearson surname in their family tree. And that's when I started finding so many of his matches who were close matches with like 90 shared centimorgans and 40 centimorgans and 35 centimorgans of shared DNA. And I started mapping them all out to their Pearson ancestor, who was the same ancestor as the Y DNA match. And they all descended from that same guy, just through different children.
So coming down, you would have to start building out his tree, his descendancy tree, because he would have different children that these matches would descend from. Is that right? So then as you found a match, you would start expanding your chart and his descendancy and connecting the matches. Is that what you did?
Yeah, exactly. What I would do is I opened up the family search family tree, which I found was fairly complete for this Pearson ancestor. One of his sons had 3 wives, so that was where most of the descendants came from. So I had that open, and then I had the ancestry DNA matches open and looked at each Pearson match, and then I matched those with which ancestor they had in their tree to one of those sons in the family search tree. And so I could kind of map it all out just looking at that. And so, of course, this was just an hypothesis at first, and it still kind of is because I need to go through and verify each one of these descendancy trees to make sure it's correct. And I already know that there's some things that are sketchy, especially the descendants of the one son who had 3 wives. Some of those children, they don't know who the mother is. So they know that the father is the Pearson, but which mother, it's unclear. And so I need to go and sort out that family and figure out which child goes to which mother because it affects how much shared DNA each of the matches have. And I think that the second or the third wife is the one that my client descends from because that's his closest match who has 92 centimorgans shared with him.
Right. So one of the things that you taught me this week when we were screen sharing and you were teaching me how to do Lucid Chart was to keep notes on that individual's little, I don't know what to call it. What do you call it? Their cell, their bubble, their little rectangle.
Their box,
where
yeah.
you are their box where you're putting the match. So what I did was I put, and you taught me this, I put the name of the match as it is listed on Ancestry or Family Tree DNA or MyHeritage or 23andMe, and then the amount of centimorgans, and then the different variations of relationship it could be, like the half cousin for once removed. Anyway, that really helped putting all the different varieties of relationships there as I was trying to make sense, because I did a DNA project this week also, which was Y DNA and autosomal, and matched it out. And I'm in the process right now of writing the report. And so it's been so very helpful for the report to have that chart drawn out that I can give the client. So when I'm discussing the DNA, they actually have a chart to look at, which will make sense instead of, me just talking about these batches and these centimorgans and relationships. Seeing the picture is wonderful. So I loved all the help that you gave me on getting that put together. And the other thing you mentioned that was very, very helpful was to make sure that you keep all the relationships at the same level. So, coming down, making sure the brothers and sisters are all on the same level. And then coming next, the next generation, keeping the generations even so that you don't start getting these boxes going all over the place, that you've got generations in a row.
Yeah. That really helps when you're looking at what relationship this would be between your matches and your client or whoever it is, to just say, okay, this is 3 generations removed and it's a second cousin. So second cousin 3 times removed, just counting down the boxes.
Right, exactly. It really does help. And I like this better now that I've learned this. I'm looking right now at my mind map that I did on my sister's DNA case, which is fine, but I wasn't able to do that because this program doesn't let you kind of specifically put things in a row. It sort of jumps around a little bit. So I've got all these MindMup. I've got all these lines going different places, and my generations aren't in a row, which makes it more difficult to see the relationships and figure it all out.
Right.
So we've talked a lot about, charting and mind mapping for DNA, but there are some other really great ways to use it. And one of the things that I like to do when I get a really difficult client project, this is usually in the 1700s, and I'm trying to put together families with things like tax records, probate, land records. So I have all these random people of the same surname.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't have a pedigree. I don't have, with the exception of probate, which can say, parents and children. And then sometimes the land records will say, giving this land to my daughter born in consideration of 1 pound. So, I will have a few scattered relationships, but a lot of times it is a bunch of records with a bunch of different people, all with the same surname. And I know they're all connected, but how do you figure that out? Well, I get out my big whiteboard and I start drawing on it with markers and putting in records and different colors and making connections and drawing lines. And I actually really love doing that. But then what do you do after you've done all that connections? You don't want to just wipe away that whiteboard. And so what I like to do after that is transfer that to a mind map or Lucid Chart or something so that I actually have something saved with all of my ideas. And you might say, well, why don't you just start off doing that? Well, sometimes I just like to get off the computer and look at something not on the computer, and sometimes my mind works a little bit better like that. So either way, drawing these relationships out really, really can be wonderful in helping to visualize our family relationships way back, even if it's not a DNA match.
Yeah, that's so true. There's a couple other things I wanted to mention about Lucid Chart that I didn't say yet that are cool. One thing that I did is that you can add color to a box. So what I did was I color coded all of the ancestry matches pink, and then all of the MyHeritage matches orange, and then the one Y-DNA match I had was yellow. So I could see where all my matches were coming from. And then everyone else was white because they were just not matches, they were ancestors. So then I can see who all the matches are. But there's different things you could color code if you wanted to. Another thing that's great about Lucid Chart, though, is that you can highlight a whole sub part of the tree and then move that branch over. And Lucid Chart is very intuitive as far as fixing all the lines and kind of making it look the way that you want it to. So you just have to highlight it and move it, and it will kind of fix it and make it look nice for you. And it's really easy to use once you figure it out. So if you just watch a short tutorial on how to use Lucid Chart, then you'll be off and running. There's a couple things that are tricky at first. And if you're not sure what to do, then just, like I said, there's a lot of tutorial videos to watch. But the main thing that I do is just drawing a box with a line going to another box. So it's pretty simple to use it for that.
Yeah, it is. And, as far as these types of things, you really just can be as creative as you want to be. Lucid Chart has all sorts of fun things. You don't even have to use boxes. You can use all sorts of things. You could have triangles. You could use squares, circles, or any kind of different kind of an icon. And so I'm thinking, if I'm diagramming relationships and I'm doing maybe a county, all the probate records could be triangles or I could do colors, and all the land records could be circles. There's so many fun ways that it can help us to see the information that we need.
It's so true. And I just have to say a huge thank you to Robin for teaching us about Lucid Chart. And she wrote an amazing blog post for us called Seeing the Big Picture, 3 Ways to Chart Your DNA Matches. And we will link to that in the show notes. And there's a picture of an example Lucid Chart that she has used for DNA there. And then we also have links in the show notes to Diana's blog post about solving Nancy's case. So you can read more about that and about using MindMup. And just a little bit more now to finish up. Lucid Chart is free to use for just a couple charts. And then if you want to use a lot more charts, then you need to purchase a subscription to that. And if you don't want to purchase a subscription to Lucid Chart, you can try using another option, which is similar, called draw.io. And that is a free open source diagramming software program in the cloud, web-based. So you can try using that. I looked into it and it seemed like a good option if you didn't want to use one that costs money. And then another option that I've also heard of is PowerPoint. So if you're really familiar with PowerPoint already and you're comfortable with that and you don't want to learn something new, or you just want to stick with it, then you can use PowerPoint and you can just draw boxes and lines. It is easier to use Lucid Chart because the lines appear like magically for you and they move intuitively as you move things. If you like PowerPoint, you can do that. And there's also a feature in PowerPoint that helps you create family trees or hierarchies. And that's the Smart Art feature in PowerPoint. So if you just go to Insert, Smart Art, which is under the illustrations category and insert. Then you can choose hierarchy maps, which are typically used for making organizational charts, but you can use it to create a family tree diagram like a descendancy tree. And it's a lot easier than using, just the simple boxes that you might draw on your own. So try out that if you're a fan of PowerPoint. I'll put a link to the Microsoft support article about using the Smart Art hierarchy feature so that you can try that out. But like I said, we really like LucidChart. So that's what we currently recommend. Just because when you're working on a case like this, it's helpful to use something that makes the process easier for you, not harder. And that's really what it did for me, is just making it so easy to draw the boxes, and the lines just kind of are so simple to draw for you. And after you draw a line, then you can just click to add another box right then. So yeah, we really like it.
I can tell you really like LucidChart. Well, I like it too. I've had fun, and I'm actually really excited because I will be honest, I first heard about LucidChart when I was doing this advanced DNA course at the Salt Lake Institute of Genealogy. Oh my goodness, that's been over a year ago. And for some reason, I just never tried it. I think I was just afraid of it. I thought, I don't want to learn a new program or what have you.
Uh-huh.
So I had heard of it, and I just had never gotten into doing it. So, I think sometimes we just need somebody to give us a nudge and say, hey, you really do need to try this, because what you're doing is certainly not working. Try something new.
You know what it is? It's kind of like doing DNA research without a research log.
Yeah.
I would never do regular research without a research log now that I've done it. And now I will probably never want to do DNA research without a Lucid Chart diagram, because how else am I going to keep track of what I've looked at and what I've figured out about that person's line and how they might be related to me? So even though I didn't know how all these Pearsons were related to my client, Jones, I still mapped them out, just thinking, this will help me figure it out. If I can just put this line up where I think it should be, I think my client is a Pearson somehow. And so putting it all there really helped me solve it. So I think that's what it is. It's kind of like your DNA match research log.
I love that. And remember that we discovered you can insert a link into your little boxes. So you could link to the actual match on whatever website it is, your DNA website, and click straight to the match. And that's a neat thing too, because I like to have live links in my research logs. You can do links in your Lucid Chart to get straight back to that match and examine it and look for more shared matches with that match. So there are a lot of possibilities here. And I think as we continue using it, we'll probably fine tune it and think of even more ways that it can be very helpful in our research.
Yes. Now that you say that, I'm remembering that the other day I made a Lucid Chart to illustrate to my son how he's related to somebody famous, because he was, not that famous. We were just watching the LDS General Conference, and one of the men giving a talk is his first cousin twice removed. And so he wanted to understand what that even means. So I had to draw him a little chart, and I thought it would be fun to use Lucid Chart because it's so easy.
Yeah.
So I drew a Lucid Chart to show him how he's related to one of the LDS General Authorities.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's fun. I love learning new technology after I've learned it. When I'm in the middle of it, sometimes I have a love-hate relationship with it. But once I've learned it, then I love it. And I'm now loving LucidChart because I'm feeling like I've mastered it. It really only took me about half an hour to master it too. So that's pretty good learning curve. It was pretty easy.
Yeah, it's pretty easy to use, guys. So if you've been having trouble, just try mapping out a relationship for something you already know that would be simple to do, so you can just learn the program, kind of like I did for my son. Like, here's how you're related to this person. And then after that, hopefully you'll get it. So have fun with that, and we will talk to you guys next week.
All right. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you for listening to Research Like a Pro with Diana Elder, accredited genealogy professional, and Nicole Dyer. We hope that something you heard today will help you make progress in your own genealogy research. If you like what you heard, please leave us a review on iTunes or Stitcher, or visit our website, familylocket.com, to contact us. You can find our book, Research Like a Pro, A Genealogist Guide, on Amazon.com and other booksellers. We hope you'll start now to research like a pro.